Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Inside the Pickle Jar. And I'm going to start today with a question. When was the last time you felt like you truly belonged somewhere? Not tolerated, not included out of politeness, not allowed to stay as long as you didn't take up too much space. I mean, belonged. Like the room was better because you were in it. Like you didn't have to translate yourself before speaking. Like you could just be. For some of you, that feeling is recent. And if it is, hold on to it and keep building toward more of it. For others, and I think this might be most of us, that question lands somewhere a little tender. Because the honest answer is not often. Maybe not ever. Not in the way it's supposed to feel. So today we're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about the science of belonging, why neurodivergent people need tribe just as desperately as anyone else, and why finding it is so much harder than it looks from the outside. We're going to talk about rejection, about the fear of making one wrong move and losing everything, about the exhausting math of trying to figure out how to enter a group without accidentally breaking it. And we're going to talk about what it actually looks like to find your people. Not perfectly, maybe not all at once, but for real. So I'm Tanya, and again, this is Inside the Pickle Jar. So we'll start with biology, because I think a lot of neurodivergent people have quietly concluded, after enough rejection, enough not fitting, that maybe they're just not wired for connection. That belonging is for other people. And I just really want to dismantle that right now. Human beings are pack animals, full stop. We've evolved in tribes. Our nervous systems were literally built around the presence of other people for safety, for co-regulation, for survival. Belonging isn't a preference. It's a biological need as fundamental as food and sleep. And here's the piece that matters for our community specifically. Neurodivergent people are not exempt from that need, not even a little. Research on loneliness and social isolation shows that chronic disconnection, the kind that comes from years of not finding your people, has measurable effects on mental and physical health. Higher rates of anxiety and depression, dysregulated nervous systems, a baseline stress level that just never comes down. And neurodivergent people experience social disconnection at significantly higher rates than the general population. Not because we don't want connection, but because the path to it is filled with obstacles that most social frameworks weren't designed to account for. So if you have spent years feeling alone in rooms full of people, that is not a personal failure. That is a person with a profound need for belonging, moving through a world that keeps setting up the game in a way your brain wasn't built to play. Those are very different things. So I'm going to tell you a bit about my own search for tribe, because I think my story is probably closer to yours than it might look like from the outside. I didn't have an easy time with belonging when I was very young. I never really fit in at school. I was always slightly outside whatever the group was. I was just watching, trying to figure out the rules, but never quite landing inside them. And kids, as you may know, are not always kind about that. I wanted so desperately to be accepted that I made choices from that desperation rather than from wisdom. And I attached to people who weren't right for me because they offered something that felt close to belonging. And I stayed in situations longer than I should have because the fear of being alone again was worse than the cost of staying. The people who were supposed to stay, and some of them didn't, not because of anything I did, but because I didn't fit a mold they needed me to fit. And when that happens, when the people who were supposed to be your foundation decide you don't belong in their world, it leaves a particular kind of mark. It leaves you believing that belonging has conditions, that you are one wrong move away from excommunication, that the only safe strategy is to monitor yourself constantly, to be palatable, to be small, to be easy. Because if you take up too much space, people leave. I carried that belief for a long time, and I'm still unwinding it. And I think if you're honest with yourself, some version of it might be familiar to you too. So let's name the specific reason belonging is harder when you have a neurodivergent brain. Because these aren't character flaws, they're neurological realities. And naming them matters. So, number one, there's the unwritten rules problem. Most social groups run on unwritten rules. Unspoken norms about when to speak, how long to speak, how enthusiastic to be, what topics are safe, how close to stand, when to make eye contact, and when not to. Neurotypical people absorb these rules almost unconsciously. They pick them up from context and from microsignals, from a kind of social ambient awareness that many neurodivergent brains just simply don't process the same way. So we walk into a room and we are playing a game whose rules we were never given, and when we violate one, not because we wanted to, but because we genuinely didn't know, the group responds, sometimes with confusion, sometimes with coldness, sometimes with exclusion. And we file that away as, I did something wrong, or I am bad at people, or I am not safe to let into a group. When the truth is, nobody gave us the rule book. Number two, rejection sensitive dysphoria. We have talked about RSD before in this community, but it is so central to this conversation that I have to name it again. RSD is the intense, often physical pain that many neurodivergent people feel in response to perceived rejection or criticism. And the key word there is perceived. It doesn't have to be real. A pause before someone responds, a look that reads wrong, a group that goes quiet when you enter. When your nervous system is wired for that level of sensitivity to rejection, the calculus around trying to join a group becomes brutal. Because the potential cost of a no, the shame, the dysregulation, the spiral of self-doubt, can feel so catastrophic that it's safer to just never try. So we watch from the edges and we observe. We wait for a guaranteed invitation that never comes, and we call it introversion, or preference for solitude, or just being independent, when really it's a nervous system that has learned that trying hurts too much. Then, number three, and I know this one all too well, it's the fear of excommunication. This one is particular to people who have already been excluded, and a lot of neurodivergent people have. When you have been pushed out of groups before, families, friend circles, communities, workplaces, you don't approach new groups with openness. You approach them with threat assessment. You're constantly scanning. What are the rules here? What would get me removed? How much of myself is safe to show? How long until they figure out I'm too much? And that vigilance is exhausting. It also makes genuine connection almost impossible because you can't really belong somewhere while simultaneously protecting yourself from it. And then number four, the masking tax. We've talked about this quite a bit. But many neurodivergent people mask in social situations. They're suppressing natural behaviors, monitoring presentation, performing a version of themselves that seems more acceptable to the group. But masking costs an enormous amount of energy, and it creates a devastating paradox. The more successful you mask, the more accepted you feel, but the acceptance is for the mask, not for you. So you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone, because the part of you that needed to belong never actually got let into the room. When belonging is consistently hard, When rejection is a recurring theme across childhood, family, school, relationships, it doesn't just hurt in the moment, it reshapes how we move through the world. It can look like people pleasing, so extreme, it erases your own preferences. Saying yes when you mean no, becoming whoever the room seems to need so nobody has a reason to leave. It can look like preemptive withdrawal, leaving before you can be left, pulling back from friendships the moment they start to feel real, because real things can be taken away. It can look like choosing the wrong people, attaching to those who offer just enough warmth that it feels like belonging, even when the relationship is costing you more than it's giving. Because imperfect belonging feels safer than the unknown of trying for real connection and being rejected again. I have done all of these things, not once, as patterns, running in the background of my relationships for years before I had the language to name them. And here is what I want you to hear. None of that is who you are. All of that is what chronic disconnection does to a person. It is a response to an environment, not a verdict on your worth. And responses can change when the environment does. Okay, let's talk about what actually helps, because I don't want to spend 20 minutes naming the problem without offering somewhere to go with it. Finding tribe as a neurodivergent adult is different from finding it as a neurotypical person. The usual paths, show up, be friendly, give it time, don't always work the same way for us. So let me offer some things that actually do. Number one, look for interest first communities, not people first ones. Neurotypical socializing often centers the relationship itself. Neurodivergent socializing tends to work better when there's a shared purpose or interest anchoring the interaction. A book club, a gaming group, a creative community, a cause, a niche corner of the internet built around something you love. For many years, it was my running group, and we were just there to run together. And that's how I ended up running so many long distances and accomplishing some really big things when it comes to running very long distances. So I know, especially when the activity is the container, you don't have to perform connection. You just do the thing alongside other people. And connection sometimes grows from there. The pressure is lower. The common ground is already established. And neurodivergent people often show up more fully when they're focused on something they care about. Number two, prioritize psychological safety over size. Community of 3 people where you feel genuinely safe is worth more than a community of 300 where you're constantly monitoring yourself. Look for spaces where people talk about struggle without shame, where getting things wrong doesn't result in pile-ons, where you've seen someone be real and have it received with warmth rather than judgment. Those are the markers of psychological safety, and they're worth seeking out even if the community is really small. Number 3, let yourself be known slowly. You don't have to arrive in a new community fully open. You don't have to disclose everything or show all of yourself at once. But you do have to let yourself be known incrementally over time if you want real belonging. This means occasionally sharing something true, occasionally letting your actual reaction show, occasionally saying the thing that's real instead of the thing that's safe. It's a risk every time, I'm not going to lie, and it won't go perfectly. But belonging cannot be built on a mask. At some point, some part of the real you has to be in the room. Number 4, name the fear of excommunication when it shows up. When you notice yourself over-monitoring, shrinking, pre-apologizing, or holding back in a group you actually want to be a part of, that's the excommunication fear talking. Name it to yourself. I'm afraid one wrong move will cost me this. Then ask, is there actual evidence in this community that it operates that way? Or am I bringing the rules of an old group into a new space that hasn't earned that level of fear? Not every group is the group that hurt you. Some spaces are genuinely safer than your nervous system currently believes, but you won't find out until you let yourself test it, gently, incrementally, with one small true thing at a time. Number 5, build connection capacity the way you build any skill. Connection isn't something you either have or don't. It's something you practice. And if your practice has been disrupted by rejection, by masking, by years of not feeling safe enough to try, then you may need to rebuild it from a lower starting point than others. That is not a deficit. That is just where you are, and you can build from there. Start small, one interaction, one comment in a community you trust, one message to someone whose work resonates with you, one moment of letting yourself be seen. Every small act of real connection is evidence your nervous system gets to file, evidence that trying doesn't always end in rejection. That's the data from your past, and that's not the only data available. So I want to tell you why I built this community called Inside the Pickle Jar. Not the official version, the real one. I built it because I spent most of my life looking for a room where I didn't have to translate myself before entering. A space where the rules were written down, where getting things wrong was met with patience rather than punishment, where needing things didn't make you a burden. I looked for that room for a long time, in families that weren't safe, in relationships built on need rather than love, in communities that offered belonging with conditions attached, and eventually I stopped looking for the room and started building it. That's what Inside the Pickle Jar is. It's the room I needed. And I built it with the assumption that if I needed it this badly, I probably wasn't the only one. You are not the only one. Every single person in this community has some version of your story, has felt like the pickle in a jar full of something else, has learned to be smaller or louder or more palatable or more invisible, whatever the particular shape of their not fitting looked like. And they are here. Some of them are listening to this right now. That is not nothing. That is a troop. It might be the beginning of one. It might not look like what you pictured, but it is real and it is yours and it's not going anywhere. So we are pack animals, all of us, including you. The longing you feel for connection, for a place where you are known and wanted and not required to perform, that longing is not weakness, it is biology, it is humanity, it is the most normal thing about you. The fact that it has been hard to find doesn't mean you're unworthy of it. It means you have been looking in the places that were not built for you. It means the groups that rejected you were not your groups. It means the rules you couldn't learn were never written down, and that was never your fault. Your tribe does exist. Some of them are still looking for you. And the way you find each other, slowly, imperfectly, one small true thing at a time, is by being willing to show up and be real in spaces that feel safe enough to try. This is one of those spaces. You already belong here. So please be gentle with yourself, pickle friend. If you like this episode, please share, like, subscribe. We can build a place of belonging together. I'll see you next time inside the jar.